an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering nothing. This is a Cradle series recap. No new content being talked about, except for our scintillating conversation, one-sided as it may be. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode and for commissioning this entire series and for getting me into this writer and basically blessing my whole life. Thank you, Andy. Y'all, I just kind of like the other day realized that there won't be any more content on this series for like the foreseeable future. And I cannot tell y'all like how hard that hit me. The rate that he had been churning them out, I'm at least relieved that I didn't watch that in real time. So him taking a while to come out with the next book, for me, that's just how most authors operate. And so it won't hurt me the way it would if I had gotten spoiled and accustomed to his rate of writing before. Sort of also what happened with Dresden Files, now that I think about it, because I found it after I listened to Dresden Files after Skin Game was out. And so he hadn't written anything new in a while, and I didn't know that he had been previously coming out with like a book a year. And so for me, the fact that it took a while for the next one didn't hurt as much. So yeah, in that respect, I have it better. But my whole brain just broke. Jacob Online says, I think we'll still get 2 Cradle books this year, so I'm okay. I just didn't expect another one this year. I hope you're right. At the same time, if we do, I really hope that like the time that I would be covering it wouldn't fall around my wedding, because having to like take a break for my wedding and go without reading for weeks would be so hard. I'm going to have to take a break from reading Cradle to get married, I guess. I don't like this. All that said, I just really want everybody I know to read this series. I've been trying to think lately about exactly what it is that catches me so much about this. And I think that part of it is I am still like, and I have mentioned before, in talking about Dragon Ball, last episode I talked about Pokemon, how very like anime a lot of this story feels. And as somebody who doesn't really watch a lot of anime, a lot of this still feels like incredibly fresh and new to me. So some of that isn't even like necessarily to Will's credit so much as that I am a good audience that is impressed by things that I bet other properties have been doing for a while, in terms of just like the way that magic is talked about and the way that it sort of manifests like with gold signs and the attacks taking form with, you know, forged weapons or like physical symbols. But when it comes to his writing, there are several things that really come to mind for me. First, he is extremely patient. And there are so many authors who could learn from this. He sets things up and lets them just simmer and doesn't feel the need to really push it and has it sort of speak for itself. And a major factor here for me is the relationship between Lyndon and Yaren. Y'all know, if you listen to my other Unspoiled shows and other Spoil Me's as well, I don't like romance most of the time in my stories because it's almost always used as a source of cheap drama. Like it almost never fails, that it's just inserted to sort of like artificially up the stakes of things, or create like some sort of, there was a misunderstanding and neither of them will even listen to each other. And so they're each being motivated to do shitty, hurtful things because they think the wrong thing. Or we're going to have this couple be in love, but then we're going to tear them apart. And all of the series is going to be based around them trying to like find each other again, which just shoot me. And it's just, I don't see romance done well often at all. It's shocking considering how much romance content exists, how little of it is actually any good. And I love the fact that it's not until Black Flame that we even get a hint of a feeling between the two of them at all. And that hint is very subtle and passes by. And the next time that we have any sense of that is, I think it's at the end of Ghostwater or at the beginning of Underlord, when Yaren is in the room with Lyndon by themselves after he has leveled up and become like her equal. And she's suddenly extremely aware of like how close he is and his body heat and how like much he's grown. I mean, that we're talking 5th, 6th book here. And even when Will begins to introduce this, first of all, they're both fully formed people with their own motivations and distinct personalities, and we understand what they see in each other, which is key. Part of what I don't like about a lot of romances is that I don't get what is attracting people to one another beyond the fact that they are each hot. Which, you know, that's fun to a point, but when you can't even actually see the people, that doesn't really count for even that much. And so, you know, I love the fact that their priorities are aligned, their drives are aligned, and therefore their attraction feels so much more organic and realistic, you know? Secondly, about the way that he has handled this and why I like it, and this is true to his whole series so far as far as I have seen. I don't know about his other writing, because writers can have a very different voice with different series. But in this series, at least, Will doesn't sexualize any of his female characters in any way. Y'all, do you know how rare that is? Like, really, do you? It's so pervasive that I don't realize that's what is making me feel comfortable in a universe I'm reading until a minute has gone by and I finally start to realize, oh, this woman has been introduced and has been on the page for like a full chapter and I don't know what tit size she has. Like, this is one of those things that I will cite as the biggest drawback of Dresden Files, which I'm bringing up Dresden Files a lot here because it's a series that I consumed really quickly also, and has a fan base that's very like fixed and also kind of male dominated. And I'm not sure if Will White has that as well, but I get the feeling from my chat, there's a lot more dudes here than ladies. And that can result in a sort of like shitty fan base that doesn't respect the fact that women have a problem with that. When I'm in Dresden Files fan groups and anybody brings up the male gaze in his writing, they get dogpiled and everybody just bites their head off about, well, that's how guys think. And it's like, yeah, well, there's a lot of things about the way people operate that we don't see on the page. You don't have to include everything, and it doesn't really add anything to the story to know these things. And I would say that Will White is a great example of how we don't know anything intimate about Yaren's body other than she's extremely slender and like tough, you know. There is not a ton of description of her appearance other than the changes that happen when she absorbs her blood shadow, the fact that she clearly cuts her hair with her own sword, and that she's got scars all over her, none of which are particularly about like sex appeal. And yet Lyndon's attraction to her, their mutual attraction, is so understood and so clear, despite that this part of who she is isn't like, just beaten to death. And I appreciate that so much. I really do. There's occasional mentions of like, she was full figured, or he had big shoulders and was very handsome, but it's a very general sort of, that can be interpreted a million ways, Evil says, except when malice is creeping up on someone, the fan base was a little split about giving Yaren so much attention, e.g. Wintersteel. Sam says, guys thinking that's how guys think, not realizing they are the problem. Honestly, part of me feels that way and agrees with you. And another part of me is like, you can't control the things that you think right out of the gate. But what you choose to like follow up that unconscious thought with is who you are. And it does sort of just follow that same train of thought to me. Evil says, but fortunately Will lied to us and said he changed it from being a Yaren-focused book. Oh, that's smart. Oh, Will. Isn't it a shame? That's too bad, though. Like, I can't imagine what it's like to be less interested in Yaren as a character than Lyndon. What is that? What is wrong with you? Like, look, Lyndon is great. I love him. He's fantastic. He's so badass. He's a super character. Not taking anything away from him. But Yaren's shit is bananas and really awesome too. And she's fascinating. I just can't understand. I don't. Whatever. So that is something that I've actually, the lack of sexualization is something that I have been meaning to bring up multiple times. But unsurprisingly, I forget to talk about the lack of something instead of the presence of something. So I kept forgetting to even bring it up. So I talked about the series, actually. I took a walk today with Owen. And Owen is in the first chapters of Uncrowned. He tore through Underlord. I was like, what? Because he took so long to get through the first 3 books. And then all of a sudden, just like overnight, he got through the rest of Ghostwater and then went into Underlord. And he was like done with that by the end of the day, which I should have, like, he started a new job or a new client and he spent all day there. So that's probably why, is that he had like a 14-hour shift and he was probably listening the whole time. Sam says, I was thinking you would have read the Zeal short story. I'm not sure I'll be in a situation where I can, but I'd love if someone could commission one special episode for that. Oh, Sam, I think I mentioned that maybe I could cover that like 2 episodes ago, but by the last episode, I had forgotten about it and nobody mentioned it last time. So I'm sorry about that. It was sort of like vaguely on my mind, but it wasn't officially on the schedule, so I forgot. But yeah, if anybody, I've been saying, if anybody wants to commission the other series as well, that Will has written, I'm curious about it. But if nobody does, I might just read it for fun. But I am curious about the Zeal short story, and it's weird to now know that I can go and search things on my own, and I won't have to worry about spoilers because I'm caught up. I've had to be so careful up until now, So what Owen and I were talking about when we took this walk were one of the major things that I think is, it can make you sound like a little bit of a baby if you say this, but I'm going to say it because it's true. Look, sometimes in stories, you just want the good guys to win and for good things to happen. And a lot of writers, I feel like, take joy in just ripping your heart out over and over again. And it's not that there isn't value in tragedy and pain. Like, as a reader, some of the most painful things I've read have also moved me so much. but it can feel like it's done for the sake of it, like it's done for the shock value, or there's a sort of like reputation, for example, that George R.R. Martin has for his like ruthlessness and being willing to kill characters. And while I do think a lot of that reputation is unearned, because those who have read the whole series know he actually like walks that back a fair amount. But even so, that reputation is treated as a badge of honor in a way that I don't really feel like. I feel like people miss the point. The original reason why people were impressed with George R.R. Martin's ruthlessness is because he fooled us into thinking that certain characters were going to be major players throughout a series, and abruptly made us realize that what we thought the story was going to be about was not correct at all. And very much like redirected us in a way that makes me think of something like Psycho, where there's a whole, a starter character that winds up being like you spend a fair amount of time with, and then they're killed and you're like, oh, wait, what? So I am of the opinion that while more writers should be willing to kill characters that are major players in their plot, because I think that is interesting. It raises stakes. It makes you as a reader more nervous and adds a lot more tension. I also think that there can be a sort of masochism or sadism to the way that authors do it. And it feels like there's no imagination behind it. It's just being done because they're trying to get a reaction instead of telling a story. And I love how much Will White is willing to let us have some wins. He doesn't let us have all unadulterated wins. Lyndon doesn't win uncrowned, which I really think most people probably expected going into it. I love the fact that both Mercy and Yaren are in the tournament for longer than him. I think that's fantastic. It's so not what I expected. It completely surprised me. And what Lyndon does go and do, it turns out, is hugely valuable. He's out here just harvesting power from people with this new technique that he discovered. Well, didn't discover, that he was taught, and is leveling himself up to this point that's banana pants. He would not have had the opportunity to do something like that if he were still in the tournament. Granted, he would have gotten a lot of like gifts that probably would have done the equivalent in some ways for him. But this is him getting to practice a new technique, which is really different. And I don't know about whether he would have like made his pact with Little Blue if he had been in the tournament, if it would have felt as necessary as it does when he's actually like facing some people in an open battle situation. So I really like that Will White has the imagination to be like, okay, I'm going to set up this thing. Here's what people are going to think is going to happen. And I'm not going to do that. But I'm also not going to have it just be a tragedy for the sake of it, where Lyndon doesn't get very far and he has to sort of just cope with his feelings of inadequacy on the sidelines. No, he undercuts our expectations and then gives Lyndon something else to do that's also fascinating and very, very different, and still has a ton of value to the story overall, and gives us something like we are learning about the way that I feel like it wasn't until this book and the last book that I really started to understand the way that like the nations and clans are set up in this world, and seeing the way that shakes out with being able to engage but not like kill each other. I found this really interesting. Let's see. Evil says, where I fault Will is not that he kills off great characters. It is that the good ones have fallen aside. I'm sure everyone would be happy with a book just covering the BF Empire and what's going on with Cassius and Fisher Gesha. Yeah. And the thing is, and again, I don't know how many books the series will wind up being. I think one of you said 12, and I'm going to put it out there. I'm just going to say it. It's going to be more than 12. If he's saying 12 now, it's going to be more. That's just what happens. Like, it just always does. And I really feel like he has a ton more left that he can do. I have a feeling we're going to get back characters that it feels like have fallen to the wayside. I think that's part of Will being patient. is that he lets us stretch and have time away from people. And then he is going to like rope them back in. There has to be time where our characters go away from a certain location and they're doing a different thing, but then they'll go back to that location, or those people will be brought to them based on, you know, some emergency situation that might be happening. It took a long time for us to see Jai Long and Jai Chen again. But they are here. It's just been a minute. And similarly, like Orthos, he's only shown up at the beginning and end. You know, there hasn't been much with him. I miss Orthos so much. I really do. Sam says, I would love this too, but Will has mentioned he loves starting new series more than anything. That's interesting. I could understand that. In his blog post, he talks about how when he was finishing the other series, I can't remember the name of it. He was writing the final book, and he says that basically all of the world building created so many obstacles for him forming a new story that didn't trample over what he had laid down for his lore, and without creating inconsistencies, he felt incredibly hemmed in, and it didn't feel like he was free to be creative. It felt like he was just struggling to stay like within these lines. And even then, beta readers caught several inconsistencies and mistakes that he had to like fix. And he says that I'm confident that the book is good, but it was not fun to write. And I've often thought of that, like, in a, sort of hypothetical way, how difficult it must be once you have a series that's so long running and is inclusive of a universe that's so vast. Cradle, it's multiple planets, multiple universes, iterations, just, gods with these abilities. There's so much. And trying to keep track of that must be that's a whole other job, that's its own thing. And that's part of like what I got sort of overwhelmed with in my attempts at writing a series, where I just got sort of like sidetracked by all of the minutia of this universe I was attempting to build. And the story stopped being my focus. And I wound up sort of just losing interest because I felt like I was always like getting distracted by the wrong things. So oh my God. Andy says, I loved in the bloopers how Surreal was complaining she wasn't in the book. I just realized I didn't read the bloopers for this book. Holy shit. Hold on. I'm going. Yaren hefted penance. How do I use it? She demanded. Kieran chuckled. Oh, it's quite simple. Just say the name of the person you wish to kill. Kill him, she said. Nothing happened. Say his name, I said. His name. Kill Seshkav. Shethkanas. Sheth. The arrow vanished. The monarch didn't. Oh, that is a good time. I mean, these names are a little bit much. And they sound really cool. But I will say, like, hearing them spoken is a very different experience from seeing it written down. When you see it written down, you're just like, I don't know what this is. It just looks like a keyboard smash. Lyndon, you're not an overlord. An image had swallowed the sky directly over Lyndon's head, a collection of numbers. I don't quite understand it. It looks like an icon, but I can't tell what it's supposed to be. I can, Lyndon responded. Power filled him, and he could feel his newfound authority radiating out, connecting him to a concept greater than humanity. A concept he knew well. I am the points sage. Oh, that is a good time. I like that one too. His obsession with points is just... I love it. I love it so much. It just makes so much sense for him as a person. Yaren couldn't even see what Sesh was doing inside his monumental sandstorm, but she felt his power and made out flashes of golden light that pulsed to a rhythmic, regular beat. She thought she could even hear music along with it, and then a moment later she could hear music, a series of repetitive, fast-paced notes that sounded like they came from otherworldly instruments. What do you call that song? She shouted to Kieran. The Abaddon looked grave. That's the Dragon King's most feared technique, the dreaded Darude sandstorm. Oh. Oh, I hate that song's going to be in my head now. That is... Will White just performed that attack on me, personally, right now. And I resent it. That's going to be in my head all fucking day now. Thanks! Ugh! The elders of Heaven's Glory walked Adama to the doorstep, and the woman cleared her throat. It was an honor to serve you today, Sage of Swords. That wasn't exactly his title, but Adama had never cared much for titles anyway. He waved a hand. Oh, you don't have to call me that. My full name is Timaeus Adama, but that can be a mouthful. Most people prefer it's shorter. There's some who call me Tim. That is, I swear to God, there are some who call me Tim. Remains one of the best line deliveries ever captured on film. It is just consistently funny. I've seen that movie a billion times. I've seen that clip in particular a billion times. I never don't laugh. It's just the timing and the sort of doubt in his voice. Like he's not even sure. Like it's so good. Charity raised an arm, and an owl of living Madra came to perch on it. She scratched it behind the head, and she asked, "What do you think of Grace?" Lyndon continued to answer safely. "I can trust her judgment more than others. And what if we allowed you to marry her?" Lyndon couldn't believe his luck. "Are you serious? Of course." Charity rested her hand on the owl. "I thought I would have to persuade you." "Why? Grace is rich, she's hot, she's good at sacred arts. I'd be a fool to turn her down. So am I supposed to buy a ring or what?" Can you imagine? Because honestly, that's true. That's all correct. There's somebody out there who was feeling that way. One of Dross's stubby, flexible arms touched the surface of the black orb. Light rippled on Northstrider's construct, but otherwise nothing happened. "Just a moment. This is tougher than it looks." Dross furrowed his purple brow and pushed harder, until, as he thought he'd broken through a barrier, Dross finally pushed through. As though he'd broken through a barrier, my bad. "Oh, it's amazing. So much space. Now how do I get out?" Lyndon looked to Northstrider in a panic, but the monarch's arms were folded, and his face was impassive as always. "He'll figure it out," Northstrider said. "While I'm in here, I might as well touch some things. Hey, what's that? Ah!" The surface of the orb flashed purple for a moment and then went dark. The monarch shook the construct, then peered inside. "Never mind, I was wrong. He's dead." Can you imagine? Suriel felt the cool wood of the table against her forehead. "I don't know what I did wrong," she said. "I've been around from the very beginning." Machiel gave her a sympathetic pat on the back. "Don't worry, they all like you better than me." "Then why am I not in this book?" "It's a long book as it is," Machiel said. "I'm sure you would have been included if there was more space." "I don't take up much space. It could have been a few pages longer. Cut some of the fights. Take out some Athens scenes." "Whoa now. Let's not go crazy." Suriel sobbed into the tabletop. That's very, very good. Those are, I think, maybe the best bloopers so far. I think that's a good... I wonder if he doesn't, enjoy writing the bloopers more than some of the actual scenes sometimes. Thank you for the reminder, Andy. I completely forgot about that. George says, "I'm excited for you to read his other series. They are also different and have their strong points." Yeah, I'm very curious about them. What are the names of the other series he's written, by the way? If everybody wants to tell me. And I mean the overall series, not individual novel names, although I also want to know that. Evil says, "On the subject of where is Will going with them, Lyndon did not eat Jan Chaumet, and the impression was given that she is not such a bad person in her homeland. And there is the whole name drop for her own big bad." Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Also, Shamiara was one Suriel said could help, but she's a snotty 15-year-old with a grudge. If she goes to Sacred Valley, she will get dropped down to Jade like everyone else. Will we see a return? Just questions. Elder Empire and Traveler's Gate. Okay. And you guys said that they're both set in the same universe, but just totally different places and characters, right? Am I right about that? Yeah, I've been sort of wondering about Jan Chaumet myself, because I feel like Yaren's unification with her blood shadow, it came as a surprise to me as a reader, because I sort of thought what we were gearing up for here with Yan Shomei being as strong as she is, but also getting some POVs and realizing that she isn't an inherently bad person, that we would have her and Yaren starting to slowly develop a friendship, and Yaren would learn how to handle her blood shadow from Yan Shomei rather than through the red sage or blood sage, like he had wanted, because she started to trust Yan Shomei and the fact that she wasn't like evil. And so the fact that she unified with her blood shadow instead completely, like, she doesn't need that anymore. But I really thought that I kind of had a vague idea of where that was going and how Yan Shomei could be incorporated into the story and made to feel like she makes sense here. And now that she has been part of this like attempt to murder Malice's kids and the way that whole thing went down, I don't know if there's any getting past that for Lyndon, Yaren, Mercy, any of our crew. I feel like Yaren, she's tough because of the way that she trusts people even less than every other character in the story, and nobody's that trusting in this book to begin with. But I feel like as somebody who had been host to a blood shadow through no fault of her own and been kind of like treated as a bit of a leper because of it occasionally when people found out about it, that she would be more understanding than anybody about how Yan Shomei's path isn't like an indication of who she is as a person. And honestly, I find Yan Shomei pretty fascinating and want to know more about her. So I just didn't really think that there was a way for us to get more information about her without her becoming part of the gang, or at least like a fringe part. And now it looks like that's just going to be off the table. I don't think that that's happening. And I don't know what that means, or how relevant everything else about her and her backstory is to the rest of the story. Let's see. Technically, they got connected universes, but like totally different world and magic systems, says George. Oh, okay. Different iterations, but there are still Abaddon and the magic is different. Okay, I got you. That's interesting. That's kind of a fun idea. Just having the Abaddon connection. Did the Blood Sage take Yan Shomei with him when he left suddenly? What, she captured by the Akura, or was she just left behind? I don't remember what went down with her. After Mercy got eliminated, I almost half expected Yaren to lose to Yan Shomei and for her to end up with the upset against Safara. Oh, that would have been interesting. They're like supposed to sort of weirdly be on the same side in some ways, but they're like not really. I could have seen that happening. I actually don't hate that. What a compliment. I don't hate that. No, actually, it's a good idea, Brian. Yeah, I like, there are a few characters that I want more information about in general. First of all, of course, Ethan. And I say that with a full understanding that part of what's so much fun about Ethan is that we don't know what's going on with him. We get glimpses. We get occasional POVs. But really, it does not feel like we ever have a grip on him. And that's a very difficult thing to do and make us feel like in a similar way to the rest of the gang who just doesn't seem to know whether or not they can trust him. I fucking sympathize. Like, I do, because I've been in his POV and know how sincerely he means some of the things that he says. But also, I understand if I didn't have that privilege of being in his head, how it would look on the outside. And there would be no reason for me to feel like he was being honest about stuff. I mean, you know, Yan Shomei, and this has been... Really, I was interested in her when we saw Crusher for the first time. And I was just like, what is going on there? But once we got, like, the talk with her and Yaren and what's his name, whose name I'm forgetting, in town when Yaren is like, you know, fighting against that thing. And she's trying to talk to the little girl, and she has this spooky voice, and the kids like shy away from her. That was when I really started to be like, oh, what's happening here? She just felt so much in that moment like Yaren in Little Blue, and the way that Yaren was trying to act like, oh, it doesn't even bother me, whatever, even though it clearly was like upsetting. So yeah, I want to know more about not only her backstory and the whole thing about where she came from, but also what led her to following this path, which I'm sure those things are kind of one and the same. Because the way that we have grown to understand it is that people who follow these like blood paths and using blood shadows tend to be people who don't have a lot of options. And, you know, I would just be very interested in seeing more from the perspective of not only Yan Shomei, but other people who follow this path, and the way that they feel about how they use the path, as well as the way that they are seen by other people. Of course, I want to know more about Jai Chen. What is happening with Jai Chen? Like, that girl remains such a wild card. Having held the Archstone and absorbed this power, and we really haven't gotten to see the full extent. We got to see a glimpse of her using this sort of weird, like, dragon-based attack when they were in the tunnels, when the what were they called? The Dread Gods, like, shadows were coming ahead of it. What do we call those? Are they blood shadows when they're just, like, the like, little blood madra beings that sort of, like, splatter and then reform? I can't remember what those are called. But we see that she is, you know, she has this like power that is gotten by such an unusual means that I can't imagine anybody else will have something exactly similar to her. And then there's the suspicion of, yeah, Evil's bringing this up, that she was the one that Lyndon saw in his like potential future of if he stayed in Sacred Valley and got married. And there had clearly been a little bit of a factor there when they met. Like, it felt like she notices Lyndon and begins to feel a little self-conscious about her appearance. Like there was an attraction that didn't quite have time to fully like register. I didn't get that impression from Lyndon's side of things, but we also aren't in his head for that scene. We're with him after. So, but we never hear him like thinking about her or wondering about her. She didn't seem to make the impression, except for him wondering if he had ever seen her before, because clearly he recognized her from that. So yeah, I'm curious what the deal is there with her ability and how she fits into things now that it seems he is very serious about Yaren, and I don't believe that Will White has any interest in having there be a love triangle. You know, I don't see their turn, like, if Lyndon and Yaren were to turn up in Sacred Valley, that all of a sudden her being around would make Lyndon doubt his relationship with Yaren. That's not something that Will seems to be interested in. Thank God for that. And I'm not interested in reading about it. You know, I'll just say that. I don't know. I would love to see, though, how she winds up becoming part of things after having been sidelined through no fault of her own. You know, it was like this, she was a victim and really collateral damage to this attack, and her getting to be sort of juiced up afterward is really fun. And I wish that we had gotten to spend a little bit more time with her in that state before we had to say goodbye. So Evil is saying, yeah, but what does Ruby truly do to Yaren's personality? She's less reserved, but what if it changes her more? That's possible. I don't know. I don't again, personally, I don't want anything regarding a love triangle. I'm not interested in that. So I'm just saying what I would like. And I would like, honestly, for a character like Jai Chen to not feel like she's only being involved in things because of being a potential other love interest also. I'd like to be able to see her stand as herself, and also for there to be, that's like also making a bit of a statement that relationships aren't just down to fate. It's also about how much you've gotten to know somebody and the things that you've gone through together. And Lyndon now is a completely different person than he would have been had he stayed in Sacred Valley. Granted, she's also a very different person than she would have been. And when you think about like the injury that she had sustained by the time he comes to the Desolate Wilds, she's already been injured. And that he in Sacred Valley is considered unsouled. And he winds up being able to level up, but it takes a long time. Due to that, it makes sense that the two of them would have sort of gravitated towards each other, her with this like debilitating injury and him with what is the equivalent of like a disability. And the ways in which they are changed, I think, really preclude the two of them seeing eye to eye on the things now that they may have in another version of events. Mercy. So I will say that the one thing that really surprised me about the end of this book was that Mercy's fortress isn't locked into place next to Ethan's, and that it's Zeal instead. I really thought that we just like had a crew here, you know, that it was Mercy, Ethan, Lyndon, Yaren, and that we had all just like agreed that's how this was. And I totally understand, don't get me wrong, that Mercy is staying by Pride's side and really is like wrapped up in what happens to him. But that's like, you know, for the immediate future, not necessarily how things are going to go. I don't know if maybe she'll wind up like joining in with them a little bit later. But the fact that it's not like taken for granted that she's going to be with as part of their group here, that surprised me. And was a little disappointing. And it makes some sense because her family is so distinctive and she has such pressure on her from that direction, where basically she let the monarch down and she was rebuked very publicly for that. So, you know, it makes some sense that she wouldn't really be able to strike out on her own. That was a luxury that she was granted when she had made this deal with Malice, and the deal's over. But I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. I was still feeling like she was part of everything. And it's just a bit of a bummer because the Akura clan, while their resources and all of that are fascinating in that, you know, like when Lyndon was training with the Akura clan, I really enjoyed that part of that book. It was fun to read about how much he had access to the reaction of all the other family members to his sudden inclusion in everything, to learning about what kind of home he was given and the servants and all of that. That was really fun. But that was coming at it from, you know, being in Lyndon's perspective, where he has never had these kinds of luxuries. And this was all very like new and exciting and something that he was able to take full advantage of because he doesn't take any of it for granted. If we go back to the Akura clan from Mercy's perspective, we're coming at it from a very different place where she's a granted much kinder and more thoughtful, but still the rich, gifted child of the monarch of this clan. And I feel like there's going to be a lot more sort of like political intrigue, perhaps, with her. And it will be so separate from everybody else that I don't know. There's nobody around Mercy as of right now that I'm interested in her interactions with. Like, Malice is just, it's not that even that I dislike Malice. It's just more that she's so unknowable that I don't really care about Malice in a general way. Charity is also tries so hard to keep her like poker face on. She's not a character that I dislike, and I've grown much more fond of her since her sticking up for the Blood Shadow. But I mean, Pride is just, as much as he's on our side and has done the right thing, he sucks. And Fury isn't really around. He is by far the most likable out of everybody, but also mercurial, you know, and unreliable and very like, flighty feels like the wrong word. Flaky, I guess, maybe. He just is so interested in entertaining himself a lot of the time that knowing where he's going to be at any given moment feels like it's something that I can't predict. So I'm not as invested in Mercy if she's not around some of the characters that I've grown attached to. That's not to say that I don't think that Will White can pull it off, because I definitely do. But I'm just saying that, like, these are my sort of concerns after having an expectation that didn't actually pan out at all. So Brian says, I still feel like the Akuras are a bit sinister in general, and the gang are going to end up regretting enforcing their faction before the end. That's an interesting idea. I think that, like, I haven't seen enough about the Akura clan myself. Like, I understand where you're coming from on that. Really, that's sort of what this series has done a few times, is they set us up with, like, limited information, have us operate under that for, like, the duration of an entire novel, and then the next book you find out that wasn't correct. They had... not even necessarily that people were like deceiving them actively or lying, but that they just didn't know everything, and they were coming from a very limited point of view. And, you know, like the people in Sacred Valley, it's not like they were lying to Lyndon about his abilities or their own, but it certainly wasn't complete information they were working with. So I wouldn't be surprised, because of the fact that we do get layers revealed so slowly. I wouldn't be surprised if we do find out some things about the Akura clan. And I'm also extremely curious about the nature of the curse over Sacred Valley as well, because the impression I have is that nobody there knows about this curse. But now I'm like, well, Elder, what was his name? Whisper? Does he know, or what's going on there? And is there any way to lift that? And if it, like, I'm also unsure of the parameters for this sort of thing. It seemed when we were in Adama's perspective, when he is, you know, going into the tunnels and caverns, he seemed to be under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that when he leaves Sacred Valley, he'll be fine. He goes back to being a sage, if I'm not mistaken. So, is that true of Orthos also? Or is that something that only a sage can be guaranteed because of their resilience and their, you know, their other abilities? Will Orthos be leveling back up again, or will it? And also, so much of, like, the reason that Orthos is here is because the journey to Underlord for a sacred beast is different, right? What does that look like? And if he has been lowered to a jade at this point, can he advance? Or does that have to happen outside Sacred Valley? What options are there for him in that regard? Because it's not as if he's actively, his abilities have dropped back down to jade, but it's not as if, like, he's lost, like, his body is still as tough. I guess that's the Ironforged body. So I guess if he's a jade, that makes sense that he held on to that. I'm just trying to think, like, advancement in Sacred Valley for Orthos feels like it's not even really on the table at this point. But that's why he's there. So what exactly is it that he's trying to do in order to get, and why is this necessary for his advancement? Why is the requirement for a sacred beast different? And what does that actually mean. Let's see. Brian says the restriction would be lifted, but I think they might still need to expend considerable resources to recultivate their previous power. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I could see that, I could see if that were true, using like the Sacred Valley as a sort of training ground for people where it's like, well, I'm going to put you back down and force you to like level up again. And I say that with the knowledge that it doesn't sound like practical, but I'm just trying to think of the sort of coming of age obstacles that I've heard about, of like making things much more difficult in order to force you to get through them. And I wouldn't think that would be part of the advancement to Underlord for a sacred beast, because the valley is cursed. That's a very particular situation. It's not like you can just send people to lands where their abilities are drained away from them on a whim. This is a place that's sort of like, it's even under restrictions over who can come and go and what they can do there. I don't know. Evil says, Orthos is not there for advancement. He's there for family, e.g. Lyndon can't be there. I mean, but the whole reason that he departed from Lyndon's company is because of advancing. Like, that was the reason that he gave. So I disagree. I think that he absolutely is there for advancement. It just has to do with Lyndon's family. I think that they are one and the same thing. I mean, there's no, like, I don't have hard evidence of that beyond the fact that he said that's why he was leaving. But that was explicit in the dialogue, that the journey to Underlord is very different and for sacred beasts, and he had to do something like sort of weird and off the beaten path for a human being, at least. So I don't know. It just feels like Evil says sacred beasts advance as groups. Do we know? Where's that from? Why would, I don't know. Everybody's saying all these different things so he can advance whenever he chooses. It sure didn't sound like that. Where are you getting that? Is this like information from like somewhere else? Because the way that he talked about it, it did not sound that way. He could just stay in Black Flame with the Aurelius family. Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering, if part of the advancement process is like doing something that involves well, I don't know, because like not all sacred beasts are partnered with a human being. But I'm wondering if the fact that he's partnered has some influence over how he advances. I don't really know how that would look. And I also wonder why it is that he keeps it secret, that this is like, did he know he was heading to Sacred Valley? I assume he knew, and he doesn't tell Lyndon that. And I'm curious why not. What it is exactly that, like, I feel that Ethan had some information that he gave Orthos as to why he should go to Sacred Valley, and they have mutually agreed to keep it to themselves. That's where he is. And I would like to know what the motivation is for doing that. Let's see. Evil says Orthos said that before he left, that they advance in groups. Typically involves a journey with others making the same choice. Right in Underlord when Orthos was departing. Oh, I don't remember that at all. That didn't register. I don't know why I didn't remember that. He can advance if he chooses a form, human or turtle. Orthos has trouble deciding. Oh God, Jan, I did not remember that either. I think I was so fucking torn up over Orthos leaving that I like didn't absorb the other things that he was saying because I was so hurt that he was leaving. I don't want Orthos to be a human. Like, I mean, I understand, like, for practical purposes, having him be a person is probably easier to write in some ways. But come on, right? It's not Orthos. I don't know. I say that, but then I bet I would eat my words. Him being a turtle who could just take a bite out of a fucking chair is really enjoyable. I don't want to lose that. Orthos feels Lyndon's pain in their soul bond. A dragon doesn't need to be told to help family. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, Evil. That whole part of it, I just don't agree with your assessment there. I really feel like there's something to that. I don't know if it's the, Lyndon's family being part of his group, or what, but it just feels like that is linked intrinsically to me. Beasts can choose human form for their own benefits. Humans take on aspect of beasts for their iron bodies and remnants. Is it Nehua? Nehua says, I don't think the choice is between human or turtle. He just needs to pick a form, whatever that is. Brian says, here's the quote. Humans have to discover what drives their souls to action, Orthos continued. It's the spark that starts their transformation. Sacred beasts do not have to discover who we are. We have to choose. Can you choose to become a dragon? That would make it easy. Lyndon had intended to lighten the mood, but he failed. Or a turtle, or even a man. Traditionally, this involves a journey alongside others making the same choice. But I am the only one. He turned to Lyndon. Until only days ago, I convinced myself I could make the journey alongside you. But you move so quickly, and I am, after all, a turtle. Okay, hi. Why did you have to, re-victimize me with this quote? That just kills me all over again. Okay, so this sort of feels... That's interesting. You move so quickly. There is no place that he could go where humans move as slowly as he does in his evolution than Sacred Valley. That's everybody is slowed down there. It makes sense to me. He has gone there and is that just lines up for me. That makes sense. I feel like that has to do with his choices. And it might not be a direct exact correlation, but that feels like there is a relationship there. And that yeah, it's interesting because the assumption that I think it was you, Evil, of he can be an underlord whenever he wants. He just has to choose. I don't know that sounds right. Choosing is a really major emotional moment. And it's different than discovering something about yourself that you didn't previously know. But it's still something that you're going to have to feel with your whole heart is the right thing to do. I feel like there would probably be a similar revelation in your choice of form. So I'm not sure I believe that he could just become an underlord and he would just be all right, I'll just be a person. And that I feel like that's something that he would have to contemplate in the same way that our friends had to contemplate what drives them. Because it's a similar sort of I don't know. Yeah. This is why I thought he went to Sacred Valley to pick up some stunted family for company. Yeah. Andy says, elsewhere it's mentioned that human form conducts Madra better. That's why dragons have a human form. But Orthos loves his shell, so maybe he'll end up a man with a shell like a Ninja Turtle. I swear to God, Andy, I really hope that doesn't happen. I will never, ever be able to take him seriously again. And especially if it weren't just a shell over his back, but he has the whole front shell also, and he's just basically walking around inside a box with his arms and head and hands sticking out yeah, that is really I hate that image. We read lots about Akari contemplating it, but she is around 20. Orthos is 300 and stopped thinking about it long ago. Yeah, and she can apparently go back and forth also, which would Orthos also be in the position where he could do that? Because she has that what is it that Rhaegon Shen gave her, that little statuette that helps her to change forms even more easily. And it makes it sound like she didn't even really have to choose. She's still getting both. Her human form becomes more and more human looking as time goes on, but she still has her dragon form, right? If she wants it. could Orthos be in that position also? Because if that were the case, and Orthos could be like sometimes a person and sometimes a turtle, that would be kind of interesting. I could see that. I don't know. What I'm saying is, I miss Orthos. And also, I just want a little bit more of what's going on in Sacred Valley. The little tidbits that we got this book were such a tease. And I'm so curious. And now that Jylong has been brought back up, I had been waiting for the two of them to show up again. And we just get that little drop and then it's gone. I really hope that we get more of that. And just more of a focus on Orthos altogether in the next book. You know, he doesn't have to be like half the book or anything, but we're just getting like the beginning and end of books and it's killing me. Can an advanced enough sacred be this? So this is a question somebody asked apparently, who has transitioned to human form, change back into beast form at will. The dragon monarch Seth, for example. Will says somebody advanced enough can. Seth definitely can. He can do whatever he wants. But it's somebody like Saphara, she doesn't have a dragon form. Wait, She does, but she would have to spend soul fire and time slowly making herself back into a dragon. And that would be an inefficient use of time and soul fire, so it would be difficult. Even an archlord, it's not easy, but a herald or above, so a monarch, a herald, can... this is very confusingly written. Those can shift all the time and shift and shift. Okay, so then what is her statuette that she was given? I thought that said that she could transform more easily back and forth, and that was why it was her favorite gift. What does it do? Is that enabling her to do a thing that she wouldn't otherwise be able to? Because it says to let her do it more easily, as if she were able to do it already, and this is just making it more like she uses less Madra to do it or whatever. Sacred Valley is 1 week away as the crow flies in Cradle. How long will 1 week take in book time? Dragon Ball Z joke. Oh, sorry, that goes over my head. Probably makes the soulfire expenditure less prohibitive. I mean, I guess, but that doesn't really line up with the way that Will is saying this. I'm a little confused now. It doesn't feel like those are both operating with the same rules. I'm wondering if he came up with that, like, before or after he had decided this thing. If you know what I mean? Like, because sometimes that'll happen. You sort of get something like what do you call it? Blueprints set up a little bit after you've floated an idea. Anyway, all right, I'm over time, so I'm going to have to wrap things up. But this was really, really fun. Thank you again so much to Andy and to all of you guys for chatting with me. I hope that listening to this wasn't too weird since you guys aren't getting to see the chat and I just have to read the questions to you. Fingers crossed that is like not intolerable. But it was really fun to like hear about this stuff. And I would really like to, read the short story and find out some other stuff about the, ancillary material. I'm curious about all of that. So Brian says the quote was sourced from the Underlord release, so he may have decided it was a little easier after the fact. Interesting. We know Lyndon took her void key. Did he get her totem, and where's the Pocket World house? Good point. I really love that Pocket World house. I'm jealous. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much again. And Andy, I owe you one forever. I appreciate you all. And I'll be seeing you again eventually with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.